People who've seen nice people finally snap. What happened? This woman, Mary, I worked with, was always pleasant and cheerful, said hello in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance in special projects. She said she wanted to retire in a few years, and she had been working there for 15 years. Her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster, but this thing is huge and comprehensive and a figurative beast. Mary told the boss it would be ready in a couple of weeks, per the usual schedule. The boss said that it needed to be completed within 1 week to give to the higher-ups. Mary said it wasn't possible. Boss emailed Mary plus CC a bunch of co-workers and the assistant managers, calling Mary out for a poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary said it wasn't possible and didn't appreciate being bullied. She put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report in a timely manner, so the department was double bleeped. Good for her. She was an assistant manager and was known for being soft-spoken. At a manager meeting, one of the general managers, who was known for being a total bleep to everyone, was going off on how every store should be run. Well, she snapped. You have the highest turnover rate out of any store in the district. You can't keep employees for more than 6 months before they just quit, all saying you were the problem. Maybe you should take that advice you're giving us and use it on yourself. Edit. Wow. I didn't expect this to blow up, and thank you so much for the silver. So for anyone who's invested in what happened next. She put in her 2 weeks not even 3 days later. The manager who she yelled at was transferred to a different location out of that district. The store he managed has since bounced back and has been doing very well. My best friend had lost his mom to murder a few months prior when we were in the 10th grade. Somehow he had pulled himself together just enough to start going back to school. I don't know how he handled it with being an only child and growing up without a father. His mom was all he had. A kid that thought he was popular, that got on everyone's nerves, cracked wise to my friend's face about his mom's death. What he said isn't exactly sure. My friend threw him on the ground and punched him in the face multiple times. The end result was a broken nose, a broken left orbital, and my friend got kicked out of school. We were very grateful he taught him a lesson, but saddened it had to come at such a high cost. A long time ago, I used to do call center tech support for fairly complex issues. A really nice, quiet guy went through the same training class. He talked if you talked to him, but never went out of his way to chat. Right after training, the call center changes a ton of stuff. We start getting squeezed on the amount of time we can do documentation, how much research time we have, just metrics in general. It was utter bleep, because the favorites got to go on smoke breaks as often as they wanted with the managers. We'd essentially be punished for that because we had to keep the average numbers in a certain area. He did all the right things. Talked to his manager, talked to their manager, then to HR. It kept getting worse, plus enforced overtime. Then he got a super long call, he was on it at least 2 hours, about a complex issue, and the customer was just straight up abusing him, but he had to take it because the managers wouldn't give permission for him to hang up. And they were basically screaming at him to resolve this issue and get to his next call, but we couldn't end calls, the customer had to. One day he just stood up, stepped onto his chair, then onto his desk, threw his headset on the desk and sort of growled something like "bleep this," quietly. He looked around, staring people in the face, especially the people who took those long breaks and the managers. Then he walked out and no one ever saw him again. Everyone was super quiet and afraid to move or say much of anything. Guy I'd worked with for about 10 years, never could get ahead at work, wasn't bad but just didn't really excel. He was always kind, always ready to laugh and crack a joke. Never saw or heard him be mean, but apparently him and his wife were having some trouble, though I'd not heard him talk about it much. But one day while his youngest was out at church with a family member, he flipped out and shot his wife, then himself. Another woman I worked with even prior to that, but at the same place, was super sweet and always smiling. She was mid-divorce and drowned her 3-year-old daughter in a bathtub at her dad's, the kid's grandpa's, because she didn't want to share her with her ex after the divorce. She's still in prison as far as I know. Both are kinda bleeped up. I used to manage a pub in a small rural town, population around 300, in Australia. Running the pub was mostly a business of maintaining the peace between the itinerant oil and gas workers, and the local cattle industry families who resented their presence. The flashpoint for this conflict was frequently the jukebox in the bar. The oil and gas guys were usually city folks on fly-in, fly-out rotations, so their musical tastes somewhat differed to the locals. Anyway, so there's a guy we'll call Brian who is the heir apparent to one of the larger cattle empires in the district. Super cool guy, everyone liked him, would give you the shirt of his back sort of thing. Brian had a daughter who just married and was pregnant with her first kid. Sometime during the pregnancy she'd noticed a dodgy looking blemish on her butt, though she figured she'd wait till she had the kid to get it looked at. Months later, she's had the kid, goes to get it checked. Skin cancer, metastasized everywhere. Weeks to live. There's a huge funeral. Brian is destroyed. At the end of the church service there's a procession of vehicles out to the cemetery. Some Halliburton truck, impatient to be caught behind it, plows down the side of the road and spews dust over the whole thing. From then on Brian would be down the pub every other night. He'd get half smashed, and then put that bleeping If I Die Young song on the jukebox that was popular like 10 years back. Man was circling the drain but nobody really knew what to do about it. Anyway, one night, Brian's at the bar and the song is on the jukebox. Some guys in Halliburton patched Hivis start bleeping about the song choice. I tell them to just leave it be, but one of them gets up and unplugs the jukebox. Brian plugs it back in and puts the song on again. One of the Halliburton guys calls Brian a depressing old cunt. Brian tells him to get bleeped and, well, I don't remember who threw the first punch. But between the fight starting and the couple of seconds it took me to break it up, Brian did enough damage to put the guy in an ambulance. Edit, for those wondering how this all turned out for Brian, there was no trouble with the police because the town didn't even have a police officer at the time and the gas worker couldn't have his boss knowing he'd been brawling with the locals at the pub. I haven't lived out that way for a couple years, but last I heard Brian was still running the family cattle stations and de facto raising his granddaughter because the son-in-law works FIFO, 3 on and 1 off. In middle school, my 6'2" gentle giant friend who is literally the nicest guy you'd ever meet got teased about his mom by some short popular kid. My friend no hesitation picked him up by his shirt and slammed him against the locker at eye level and said, "Never talk about my mom like that." One of my favorite memories of him. When I was in high school, my group of like 6 friends were sitting at a round table in the cafeteria for breakfast. A table over, some girls had been tossing small chunks of their food in our direction. My one friend, M, wore her hair in an unusual, spiked up style and I guess the girls at the table were trying land food in her hair while cackling to themselves. Cue my quiet, sweet, introverted friend, K, getting so angry I swear steam was coming out of her ears. One of the girls had thrown a decent-sized piece of her egg patty at us and it landed on the floor near K's foot. K proceeded to step on the egg patty, pick it up off the ground, walk over to the table of bullies, and shove the egg directly into the mouth of the one who had thrown it. This was such an amazing moment in my high school memory. I couldn't believe what I was seeing as K was the last person I would have expected to do that. Of course she did get in trouble but she didn't regret it one bit. Back in 5th grade, I was super lucky to have the elementary school's favorite teacher. Every single student loved her. My class was always super loud and annoying. We were working on some assignment before PE, and everyone was passing her off. She was only allowing students to go out if they finished the assignment. My slow ass was unfortunately one of the last kids in the room. This one student, who was a god-awful and annoying bleep bag kid, was being way over the top. My teacher got up, put her hands over her ears and just started screaming bleep the bleep up. Just bleep up. Bleep up. Bleep up. And she just stomped out of the room still screaming with her hands covering her ears. All of us just sat there in horror. Couple of kids just left to go to PE, and I sat there just trying to finish the assignment. Our principal came into the room a few minutes later just telling the rest of us to go out to PE, but she made the bleep bag kid stay in the room with her. He was moved into the other 5th grade teacher's room after this. She was completely normal and fine after coming back. And there was nothing else that went wrong for the rest of year. Just worked her ass off and made all of us love her by her caring soul and all of that fun stuff. But that moment completely traumatized me.